Yahusha, living water, Baruch haba Hashem Yahuwah. Yahusha, living water, Baruch haba Hashem Yahuwah. I sing out with praise to you. Your name is beautiful to me, my King. I sing out with praise to you. My heart desires to honor you, my God. I sing out with praise to Yahusha, living Torah, Baruch haba Hashem Yahuwah. Yahusha, living Torah, Baruch haba Hashem Yahuwah. I sing out with praise to you. Your name is beautiful to me, my King. I sing out with praise to you. My heart desires to honor you, my God. I sing out with praise to you, Yahusha, living Torah, Baruch haba Hashem Yahuwah. Baruch haba Hashem Yahuwah. Baruch haba Hashem Yahuwah. Baruch haba Hashem Yahuwah.
Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah or Elohim. Yahuwah is one, and you shall love Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart, and with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commands hangs all the Torah and the prophets. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Wow. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're all here. Been a nice short week. And what a rush to get here. Be honest about it. It was a rush. But here I am. And I think we're good to go. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and continue in our studies from last week and the few weeks prior about the second coming of Yahusha and just how close we are to the second coming of Yahusha. So last week we kind of studied the four horses of the apocalypse, or the first four seals. And we had determined that they have all been opened. And it seems to indicate that we're very close to the second coming of Yahusha. And so now we're going to look to the seven messengers that held the seven trumpets as more confirmation and also more information about the second coming of Yahusha and where we are on that timeline, and when can we expect to see him again, right? So that's what we're going to do this evening. And before we get started, like always, I'm going to say hello to a few people in the chat room, and then we'll get started. Let me see. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll get going. So, hello, Levi Davis. Welcome, brother Levi. Shalom, everybody. Welcome, sister Sandra Brunston. Shema. Shema in Hebrew means here. Welcome, sister June Manning. Shalom, family. Delight for us to be here once more. Welcome, sister June. Glad you're here. Welcome, sister Peggy Russell. Glad you're here, Peggy. Shabbat shalom, family. Brother Raul. I'm glad you're here, brother Raul. Shalom, familia. Okay, I'm going to pause here for a second and go way out on the limb with an assumption. Now, I know when we men assume things that we're wrong 99% of the time, but nevertheless, I'm going to go ahead and take a big chance, go way, way, way out there on the limb, and I'm going to assume that Sister Yami is watching as well. So welcome, Sister Yami. Chisilda Calderia. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Shabbat Shalom, Natsarim. Trucker Trash 34. Shalom. Welcome, Trucker Trash 34. Glad you're here. Sharon, glad you're here, Sister Sharon. Shabbat Shalom. Brother Phil Dickey, glad you're here, Brother Phil. Baruch haba b'shem Yahuwah. Brother N from the U.S., Shabbat Shalom, everyone, from Charleston, South Carolina. Welcome, Brother Bob. Brother Yahudru, welcome, Brother Yahudru. Shabbat Shalom, family. Joseph Hessen, welcome, Brother Joseph. Shabbat Shalom, Mishpaka. Rose Wright, welcome, Sister Rose. Glad you're here. Shabbat Shalom, family who love. Brother Jeremiah, glad you're here, Brother Jeremiah. Welcome. Glad to see you here. Misty Daniel, glad you're here, Sister Misty. I love this song you're playing as an intro. Would love to know what it is called and who sings it. Maybe Sister Phyllis can put the link in the chat room for you. She has the link to it. But we go to Podomatic and put in Debarum, Living Waters. It should come up. Brother Lou, Sister Phyllis, glad you all both here. Welcome. Shabbat Shalom, everyone, from our family to yours. Glad you're here, Lou and Phyllis. Zaya Bonanza, glad you are here. Zaya Bonanza, you're welcome to be here. God be with you all. Yummy, Japan Natsarim. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Glad you're here, Yummy. Sister Yummy. Lorana Moran. Glad you are here, sister. Shabbat Shalom. Mr. Three Jobs. Glad you're here, John. Here I am. Kate Connell. Glad you're here, Sister Kate. Shabbat Shalom, Mishpaka. Line of Peace. Glad you're here, Line of Peace. I have a question. Yeah, I'll go ahead and type it in there. Somebody see if they can answer it for you. Let me see. Line of Peace. I'm an Israelite through Christ. Okay. Gelsilda Kadria. Oh, I think I already said hi to you, but if not, welcome. Glad you're here. Okay. If I missed anyone, sorry about that. You know, everybody's welcome here. Anytime, all the time, every time. So thanks for being here. Appreciate all of you being here, showing your love to everyone in the chat room and participating in our weekly study of the Torah and Tanakh in the Netzarim writings. And come all. Everybody's welcome here. All right, let me type in my greeting here. Shabbat Shalom, beloved of Yahuwah. So there you go. There's my greeting to all of you. And we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so like I said, this is we're going to be studying the 7 messengers with the 7 trumpets. To achieve the goal is to try to find out how close are we to the second coming of Yahusha, and seeing if these events described in Revelations will actually help us to determine the timeline of the second coming of Yahusha. And that's what the book of Revelations really is. It's all about the return, second coming of Yahusha. It's what it's about. It's revealing all the events, the condition of the world, at the return of Yahusha, so that we can see the process, the progress, of events and of the world as we get closer and closer to his second coming. And that's what this is all about, the revealing of the second coming of Yahusha. That's what the revelation is. It also is a revelation of who he is, exposing who he truly is. And the Nazarene know that he is our deliverer, Yahuwah, our deliverer. And hopefully everybody knows that. And we're going to get started here in Revelations 8 is where we first find this mentioning of the seven messengers who held the seven trumpets. And it starts in Revelation chapter 8, 6. Revelations chapter 8, verse 6. And what this is, like I said, it's each trumpet is pretty much announces another event. And as it goes through the seven trumpets, we get huge events, okay, back to back to back to back, that's going to happen leading up to his second coming. The seals are the same thing. And the bowls, the seven bowls, are the same thing. And so basically, you have a long story, a medium story, and a short story. Okay. And all three of these stories begin at a different time period with a different event, but they all three end with the same event, okay, which is Armageddon. So the seven seals begins approximately around 300 AD or CE with the creation of the new universal religion that was put together through syncretism under the acts of that outlaw back there behind me, right there, Constantine the First, who was a sun worshiper. He was an emperor of Rome, and he's the one that got that all put together by combining the religions, traditions, the cultures, the myths, the fairy tales, the fables of all the different cultures in his empire, the Roman Empire. And he took it all and he put it all together and created his newfound religion in order to control the people. And by doing this, he created Catholicism, which means, when interpreted in English, is universalism. Now, this quest of universalism has not ended. It continues even today. They have the United International Faithism, and they have the One World Religious Group, Interfaithism, and other different types of religious organizations that try to mix all the religions of the world together and try to say that everybody worships the same God. We just call him by different names. Okay. And so we all know, at least the Nazarene know, that that's hogwash, right? But it continues even today. They haven't given up on their dream. They're still trying to control people through this synchronism and through this universal religion, which is represented by the white horse. Now, Trumpets goes in, has seven messengers who held the seven trumpets, and it begins, and the seals begins around 300 AD with the creation of universalism, a universal religion called Catholicism, ends at Armageddon. The trumpets, although it has a lot more words in events within its description, it is the medium story, and it begins at a later date of 1914. Now, we're going to get into this. I'm going to explain why. But this was World War I in 1914, but it ends at Armageddon. Now, the bowls, the 7 bowls that are 7 vials, begins at Armageddon and ends at Armageddon. So it's a really short, fast-paced story about the same thing, really. But it's the events leading up to the return of Yahusha or Armageddon, but it begins at a much later date than the seals and the trumpets. And none of the bowls have been opened. None of them. Okay. So that's about where we're at. And now we're going to go through this and do some studying here to help us determine exactly where we're at. Okay. So we know that these four seals, the 4 seals are open, and they have been open for quite a while. Okay. And we're waiting on the 5th seal to be opened, which is the tribulation years. And at this point the 5th trumpet is blown, and we're waiting on the 6th trumpet to sound, which ushers in World War III. Okay, so that's where we're at, and we're going to study now and try to find out how we got there, and in fact that we can prove that that's where we're at, relating to current events that's already happened. Okay, so that's what we're doing, and so here we go. The 7 trumpets. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about these 7 trumpets found in the book of Revelations. There are 3 groups of 7 found within the book of Revelations. Okay. And these 7 are the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, or the 7 messengers that held the 7 trumpets, and the 7 bowls or 7 vials. These 3 stories, the long story, the medium story, and the short story, this group of 7, makes up what we call the skeletal structure of the book of Revelations, if you will. Okay. The actual prophecies themselves begin with chapter 4. So here we have the skeletal structure within the book of Revelations through these 3 groups of 7. And so the 7 seals, as I said, are the long story ending in Armageddon. The 7 trumpets are the shorter story or the medium-sized story, also ending at Armageddon. And then the 7 bowls are the very, very real short story, starting at Armageddon and ending at Armageddon. Okay. Now, the way that we're taught is that the book of Revelations is in chronological order, and they teach that the false teachers, anyway, the uninformed teachers, they teach that these things are all in chronological order and they all happen in a future date. And they seem to want to suggest that they all happen at the tribulation years. And these are like curses or plagues that come upon mankind from Yahuwah right in the tribulation years before the second coming. But that's not true. Okay, number one, it's not in chronological order. Okay, that's false. And number two, these events are spread out over the end times, in the latter days. They don't all come at once in the tribulation years. The tribulation years are the last 3.5 years allocated to mankind out of 6,000 years given to man to rule over himself. The last very 3.5 years of those 6,000 years are the tribulation years, or the wrath of Hashatan, if you will. The end times began at the ascension of Yahusha. So when Yahusha came, walked among us, and then he was executed on the Roman execution stake, and then he was brought down and put into his tomb for 3 days and 3 nights. He rose, he resurrected his own body, rose up, stayed with us for another 40 days, and then he ascended back to the throne as the firstborn of all creation, or the Word. And he went back and sat on the throne. And that's who's sitting on the throne. It's Yahuwah, who is omnipotent in his body of light, sitting on the throne. And that's Yahusha. Okay. And so we know this is not in chronological order, and this is spread out in the Earth timeline now. We're not going to, I ain't talking about the Roman calendar or any other calendar. I'm talking about the Earth timeline, 6,000 years or 6 millenniums, okay, or 6 days, okay, to Yahuwah. That these days, the conclusion of which everything that's going to happen in the 4,000th day, or the end of the 4th millennium, when Yahusha ascended, to when his second coming is. So we could say his first coming to his second coming is 2 days, or 2 millenniums, or 2,000 years. That's it. Because the 7th day, or the 7th millennium, or the 7,000th year, will be the reign of Yahusha, the millennium reign. Okay, the reign of the son of Adam. All right, so the end times, as Peter proclaimed, began when the Ruach HaKodesh ascended on the 120 in the upper chamber at Pentecost. And Peter proclaimed that the end times had begun, which means 2,000 years from that point, Yahusha will be back on his second coming, okay? And the way we know that these events within the story of the 7 seals and the story of the 7 messengers that held the 7 trumpets and the 7 bowls are not in chronological order, because all 3 of them have a conclusion. And guess what? It's the same exact conclusion. And what that conclusion represents or symbolizes is the day of Yahuwah. Okay? Now we can find that in Revelations 8:5. Okay? At the end of the seals. So in Revelations 8:5, it says, and the messenger took the censer and filled it with the fire from the altar and threw it to the arets, and there were noises and thunders and lightnings and an earthquake. That's the day of Yahuwah. That's the end of it. Okay? That's the end of that story. And then in Revelations 11:19, at the end of the trumpet story, Revelations 11:19 says, and the Mishkan of Yahuwah was opened in the heaven, and the Ark of the Covenant was seen in his Mishkan. And there came to be lightnings and voices and thunders and an earthquake and great hail. It's the same conclusion. The story ends at the day of Yahuwah with that conclusion. So it goes from 1914 to Armageddon. and the seals goes from 300 AD to Armageddon, but the conclusion is the same, the day of Yahuwah. And then we can see the bowls, the conclusion of the bowls in 16, Revelation 16:18. So Revelation 16:18 says, and there came to be noises and thunders and lightnings. It's the same conclusion. See that? And there came to be a great earthquake, such a mighty and great earthquake as had not came to be since men were on the arets. So there we go. We have the same conclusion, which is symbolic. When you hear that, noises and thunders and earthquakes and lightnings, that's always represents the day of Yahuwah. That's what that symbolizes. Okay. And so Revelations 8:5, 11:19, and Revelation 16:18 are the same conclusions to each story, proven that there is no chronological order in these events. They're three separate stories, okay, about the same thing. They just start at a different time, and they all end at the same time, which is Armageddon. And then we get the conclusion of the story after that, and each conclusion is the exact same. So this is astounding proof. This is absolute proof that the book of Revelations, this skeletorial part of Revelations, if you will, skeletal structure of the book of Revelations is not in chronological order. It can't be if it has the same conclusion at the end of each story. So think about it. It's three stories is what it is about the same thing, which is the second coming of Yahusha. So when we can get to understand that, we can begin to understand Revelations a little bit easier, okay? Okay, so now we know that the seven bowls in chapter 16 do not actually take place until after the mark of the beast has been implemented. And we know that because it tells us that. Okay. And so that's where we know that the story begins. The mark of the beast has been implemented. Okay. Because we know this because when the first bowl is poured out, scripture says, it very clearly says that it will be unleashed upon the people that have taken the mark of the beast, and they will get a great nasty sore on them. Read it yourself. It would be Revelation 16, verse 1 or verse 2. And 1 and 2. And I heard a loud voice from the Mishkan saying to the seven messengers, go and pour out the bowls of the wrath of Yahuwah on the arets. So this is the wrath of Yahuwah. The seven bowls are the wrath of Yahuwah. Armageddon, the tribulation years is the wrath of Hashatan. When he's confined to the earth, he goes crazy. Verse 2 says, and the first went and poured out his bowl onto the arets. And an evil and wicked sore came upon the men, those having the mark of the beast and those worshiping his image. See, so the mark of the beast has already been implemented. So we see the bowls begin at a much later date, okay, which is Armageddon. So basically, all the events within that tribulation years in Armageddon is packed into those bowls, those seven bowls, okay? So from that, we know that it will be all will be enacted at the time of the very end. Okay, all this stuff. So now, not only are there skeletal structures in the book of Revelations of 3 sevens, the 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls, but in addition to that, the book of Revelation has what we call parenthetical chapters. Parenthetical chapters. And what a parenthetical chapter is it refers to a chapter within a book that provides additional information or context that is not essential to the main narrative, often included within parentheses or set apart from the main storyline, essentially acting as a side story or explanatory section that can be read separately without disrupting the flow of the overall plot. And that's what we find, within the book of Revelations, between the stories, between the seven seals, the seven trumpets, and the seven vials. We find these parenthetical chapters. So in addition to the main overall view of Revelation, sometimes these additional chapters are included between these three stories. For an example, chapter 12 talks about a war in the Shemayim, or the heaven, when Hashatan is cast down and confined to the earth for the final 3.5 years, called the tribulation years or the wrath of Hashatan. So he gets thrown out and confined to the earth because he becomes a man. He becomes the anti-Messiah. And he's confined to the earth, and he can no longer go back and forth between the heaven, the spiritual realm, which is what heaven is, and the earth, which is the fleshly realm or the carbon copied realm. Okay. And also Revelations 13 gives us a view of what the world will be like at the return of Yahusha, the condition of the earth. And so there'll be a one world government, and the anti-Messiah will be ruling it, and there'll be a one world religion, and the false prophet will be the leader of that one world interfaithism, or one world religion, which is they're making up right now as we speak. They have been for a while now. And also the mark of the beast it talks about, and the economical system of the end time, which is a one world governmental system. Cashless society, it seems as though it suggests a cashless society. A digital money is what it seems to be suggesting. So that's when we really understand the book of Revelations. When we understand this, how it's formatted, okay? And then we can understand the book really a lot better. And it really helps us in the understanding of the events. And then we can look back. See, we have, in our generation, we have a great opportunity to understand, because we can look backwards, okay? And we can see these events that's leading up to the second coming of Yahusha. And all we need to do is put ourselves in John's shoes, the author of Revelation. When we put ourselves in his shoes, and we know what these things are. Well, he did not, but we do. And so we can easily, by reading his words, we can understand what he was trying to describe. And it's not something out of the Twilight Zone or out of some type of fictional book, some crazy stuff going on that's out of our realm, out of our reality. No, it all fits right in our reality. It's just the way John had to describe these things, because he didn't know what they were. He had no words. He could only use the words that was available to him in his lifetime. Okay? So if we begin to understand this format, the skeletal structure of Revelations, which is the seven seals, seven trumpets, and seven vials, and then understanding that we have these um, um, parenthetical chapters between the stories, and we can really begin to understand the book of Revelations then, okay? We can really begin to understand what it's all about. So when we also understand these other chapters, such as 12 and 13 and 17, and are included to give us a fuller understanding of what all of this really is about, and more information and more events to help fill in, so we can actually see even more of what era or decade that we're in, we'll just say. We begin to really, the book of Revelations really begins to open up to us. Now, the first thing we got to do is throw everything that we've been taught in the trash bin. Open up our mind to the Ruach HaKodesh, the guiding and the teaching of the Ruach HaKodesh, not man. We have to discard man's teaching. If not, you'll never understand Revelation, Daniel, or any other part of the scriptures. Really, you'll be influenced by uninformed teachers rather than influenced by the words of truth. Okay. So if you want to really understand what this is all about, okay, open your mind, discard what you've been taught, open your mind and let the new wine in. Let Yahusha teach you the truth. So let's get off of that tangent and focus on what we're here to study this evening, and that's the 7 trumpets. So it begins in Revelations chapter 8, verse 6. Now listen to it. I'm in the wrong chapter. I was wondering what's going on. And the 7 messengers who held the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. And the first messenger sounded, and there came to be hail and fire mixed with blood. Hail and fire mixed with blood? And they were thrown to the arets. And 1/3 of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. And the second messenger sounded, and what looked like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. And 1/3 of the sea became blood, and 1/3 of the living creatures in the sea died, and 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. And the third messenger sounded, and a great star fell from the heaven, burning like a torch. And it fell on 1/3 of the rivers and on the fountains of the water. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And 1/3 of the mayam became wormwood. And many men died from the mayam because they were made bitter. And the fourth messenger sounded, and 1/3 of the sun was struck, and 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars, so that 1/3 of them was darkened, and 1/3 of the day did not shine, and likewise the lamp. And I looked, and I heard an eagle flying in mid-heaven, crying with a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to the those dwelling upon the arets, because of the remaining blasts of the trumpet of the 3 messengers who are about to sound." And the 5th messenger sounded, and I saw a star from the heaven which had fallen to the arets, and the key to the pit of the deep was given to it, And he opened the pit of the deep, and the smoke went up out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun was darkened, also the air, because of the smoke of the pit. And out of the smoke locusts came upon the Arets, and authority was given to them as the scorpions of the Arets possess authority. And it was said to them that they should not harm the grass of the Arets or any green thing or any tree, but only those men who did not have the seal of Yahuwah upon their foreheads. And it was given to them that they should not kill them, but to torture them for 5 months, 5 moons. And their torture was like the torture of a scorpion when it stings a man. And in those Yama, men shall seek death and shall not find it. And they shall long to die, but death shall flee from them. And the locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. And on their heads were crowns like gold, and their faces were like the faces of men. Faces of men? And they had hair like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. And they had breastplates like breastplates of iron. And the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots of many horses running into battle. And they have tails like scorpions and stings. And in their tails is their authority to harm men 5 months. And they have over them a sovereign, the messenger of the pit of the deep, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name Apollyon. The first woe is past. These 2 woes are still coming after this. See, 2 woes are still coming. And the 6th messenger sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before Yahuwah, saying to the 6th messenger who had the trumpet, release the 4 Malachim, those having been bound at the great river Euphrates. And the 4 Malachim, those having been prepared for the hour and the yom and the moon and the year, were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. So this 6th trumpet is called would be the World War III. Okay, so this is a horrible trumpet here, the 6th one, and it's going to when that 6th trumpet blows, man, that 6th trumpet war blows, it's going to be the worst war mankind has ever been involved in by far. Okay. All right. And the number of the armies of the horsemen were 200 million. And I heard the number of them. And this is how I saw the horses in the vision, and those who sat on them, having breastplates of fiery red and hyacinth blue and sulfur yellow. And the heads of the horses were like the heads of lions. And out of their mouths came fire and smoke and sulfur. And 1/3 of mankind, that's about 2.3 billion people right now, that's a lot of carnage, was killed by these 3 plagues, this fire, smoke, and sulfur. This would be nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare. And we're going to get into that. Remember, this is John trying to explain things that he didn't know what they were. Not only did he not know what they were, he didn't even have the words to explain them at all. So he had to put words together that he had, the best he could in order to describe what he had been shown. Okay. For the authority of the horses is in their mouth and in their tails, for their tails are like serpents having heads, and with them they do harm. And the rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hands, that they should not worship the demons and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and wood, which are neither able to see nor to hear nor to walk. And they did not repent of their murders, nor of their drug sorceries, nor of their whoring, nor of their thefts. Okay. Now we get into, what we were talking about here earlier. We're getting into these parenthetical chapters. And And so we're going to want to skip over here a little bit, all the way over to 11, 15. Now, the seventh, in the yamam of the sounding of the seventh messenger, when he is about to sound, the secret of Yahuwah shall also be ended, as he declared his servants of the prophets. So there's an interruption here in the seventh trumpet, okay? And so to get over there to 11, 15, we'll pick up where the seventh messenger sounded. So 11:15 says, and the seventh messenger sounded, and there came to be loud voices in the heavens saying, the reign of this world has become the reign of our master and of his Mashiach, and he shall reign forever and ever. So this is letting us know that men's reign, the 6,000-year reign of man, is over. And now we're going into the reign of our master, which is Yahusha. So the reign of Yahusha is the millennium reign. Not the eternal reign, but the millennium reign, the 1,000-year period of time. Okay? And then it goes on down. Go down there to that last verse, 11 and 19. And the temple of Yahuwah was opened in the heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen in his Mishkan, and there came to be lightning, voices, thunders, earthquake, and great hell, which is symbolic. It's the conclusion and symbolic of the day of Yahuwah. Okay, so there we go. There's the seven trumpets and what takes place. So now we got to try to figure out what all that means, right? What's John talking about here, right? And so we can do that with an open mind if we put on our exegesis mindset and try to understand what this man was trying to explain of things that he saw in our time period, when back in his time period when he didn't know what anything was. He didn't even know what a cell phone was, man. He didn't know what a computer was. He didn't know what a missile was. He didn't know what a nuclear weapon was. He didn't know what biological and chemical warfare was. He didn't know what a helicopter was. He didn't know what a jet was. He didn't know nothing. But he tried to describe what he was seeing. So with that in mind, let's try to figure out what John's talking about here, man. Okay, so so now when we're dealing with these seven trumpets, mostly, I know a lot of you have studied this with me before, and we go through these trumpets in chronological order, 1 through 7. But this time, I'm going to do something just a little bit different because I think it maybe it'll help. And so at this time, dealing with these seven trumpets, let's not start from 1 and go through 7 like we have before, okay? Instead, let's look at the third trumpet first, okay? The third trumpet says, and the third messenger sounded, and a great star fell from the heaven, burning like a torch. And it fell on the third of the rivers and on the fountains of water. And the name of the star is called wormwood. And the third of the mayim became wormwood, and many men died from the mayim because they were made bitter. All right. So, this weird word called wormwood, okay, is what we need to kind of focus on here and try to figure this out. Okay, so wormwood, so, don't forget what it says here. It says the word wormwood remember that word, wormwood. It's critical to understand in this passage. Okay, so don't forget that word wormwood, and don't forget that it says that many men died because of the waters. Many men died from the water because they were made bitter. Okay, that's our two keys to understanding this passage here, this third messenger. And by studying this third messenger, I think it'll help us to prove what the second trumpet and the first trumpet is. And so that's why we're going to do it this way. So now the word wormwood. Okay, so the word Chernobyl is a Russian word, and for, guess what? Wormwood. So a Russian word called Chernobyl is wormwood. Okay, so instead of saying wormwood, they say Chernobyl. That means wormwood in Russian. Okay, don't forget, there was the world's worst nuclear disaster. Okay, happened in Chernobyl, in the Ukraine, and at that particular time, Ukraine was part of Russia. Okay, so keep that in mind as we talk about this. The Russian word for wormwood is Chernobyl. So when we're dealing with scriptural prophecy, man, you hear all kinds of stuff. You hear all kinds of theories and interpretations and opinions on what things mean, and it just adds to the confusion is what it does, and but it's just something that we have to deal with when we begin to talk about Bible prophecy. Just know that you're going to have to deal with it, man. Okay, we hear all kinds of different opinions and theories, interpretations on what all this stuff means. But guess what? We're going to trash can all out. And we're going to get down to the nitty gritty, and we're going to listen to what the Ruach HaKodesh is revealing to us this evening. So open up your ears, command your ears to open, and command your eyes to open so that you can see and you can hear what the Ruach HaKodesh is teaching the assembly this evening. Listen to him. We cannot accept everything that comes out of somebody's mouth. We cannot accept every single teaching that comes our way. People, we can't, Netzarim, we cannot do that. We have to reject that stuff, man. And we have to find the truth. We're truth seekers. I mean, I know in my lifetime, man, I've heard, 20 or 30 people accused of being the anti-Messiah. I mean, everybody wants to tell you that this person or that person's the anti-Messiah. We going to listen to all that? I'm sure you all have heard that too. I can remember back in the day of Ronald Reagan, some of you that are my age and around my age or older, whatever, I'm sure you remember that too. Everybody, a lot of people, man, was saying that Ronald Reagan was the anti-Messiah. And he was going to start Armageddon, nuclear war. He was going to push the red button. He was a crazy man. And a lot of people said, oh, I know for sure that Ronald Reagan's the anti-Messiah. And the reason they were saying that is because they were saying that his name, which is Ronald Wilson Reagan, through Hebrew gematria, came out as 666. That's what they were trying to say. And so they're saying that the Ronald Reagan has 6 letters in Wilson, 6 letters in Reagan, and 6 letters in Ronald. And so therefore his name is 666. And that's of course, the name in the number in the name of the anti-Messiah. And so, Ronald Reagan was the anti-Messiah because he had 6 letters in all 3 of his names, basically, is what they were saying. Okay, so then after Ronald Reagan, everybody was saying that it was Barack Obama. Barack Obama is the anti-Messiah. And then it was King Charles. King Charles is the anti-Messiah. Now all of a sudden it's Donald Trump. Donald Trump's the anti-Messiah. But it's the point of it is we just cannot believe everything that comes our way, folks. We just simply can't do that. We need to chill out, man. Okay. Obviously, Ronald Reagan wasn't the anti-Messiah like everybody was saying he was. That's pretty obvious at this point in time, is it not? And highly unlikely Obama is, and I would say highly unlikely Donald Trump is as well. But I mean, when we hear something from somebody, just keep an open mind to it. Don't get caught up in their conspiracy stuff, man. So when we hear something, a possible explanation of one of these prophecies in Scripture, listen to them, but don't swallow it hook, line, and sinker, because I found out over time that's not the best thing to do, because you just get caught up in their conspiracy theories and stuff, and then next thing you know, you're running around repeating it and you're spreading lies. And Scripture says that the chosen, the election, has no lie in their mouth, on their tongue. So we can't be spreading lies. So kind of know what you're talking about and be careful. I mean, listen to them out of respect, but don't buy into what they're saying, especially hook, line, and sinker, man, where you're running around repeating it because you think it sounds cool. So you're going to run around and repeat it, try to convince other people that Ronald Reagan or Obama or Trump's the anti-Messiah. I mean, it's silly. Don't worry. When the anti-Messiah comes on the world stage, you're going to know who he is. You ain't going to be no question in your mind. So anyways, back to wormwood. The Russians, word for wormwood is Chernobyl, okay? And there is a plant, it's called wormwood, and the Russians do use that for medicine type purposes, okay? It turns their tongues black, and the Russian word for black is also cherny. And so consequently, then they begin to call wormwood Chernobyl. That's where it came from. So one reference to prove this would be to get your hands on a Russian dictionary, of course. So a reference to proving that the Russians' word for wormwood is to get your the Russian word for wormwood is Chernobyl. So get your hands on a Russian dictionary. You can look it up on the internet as well, I guess. But yeah, and if you get a Russian dictionary in the Russian language, and if you look up that definition to Chernobyl, Chernobyl, it will say a variety of absinthe, which was in parentheses, or which is would be in parentheses, and then it'll say wormwood with the red, brown, or deep purple stem. So the Russian dictionary reference refers to Chernobyl to wormwood under the heading Chernobyl Nik, N-I-K on the end of it. There's a book out there available as well called The Truth About Chernobyl. This Chernobyl was a nuclear disaster. Most of you know that. Some of you may not know that. I guess I probably should tell you that it was a nuclear disaster from the nuclear power plant over in Ukraine. The worst nuclear disaster the world's ever had, ever. But this book called The Truth About Chernobyl is written by one of the scientists that was there at the time of the disaster, nuclear disaster. Very interesting book. He talks about the actual nuclear power plant that was in Chernobyl and that's located in the Ukraine. And this was all when the Ukraine was still part of the Soviet Union, and Crimea that they took over, that we all know about and is happening right now, was always part of Russia. But they gave that Crimea to Ukraine, and then Russia wanted it back, and that's why Putin invaded there and took that back. But there's no doubt that Crimea was part of Russia. Okay, and but anyway, the town where most of the workers lived that worked in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, was in a little town called Pripyat. Okay, and there was about 40,000 people who lived there. The population of Pripyat was about 40,000, and all of them worked at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Okay, so I want to do a screen share with you here. Show you some pictures of this place, if you will. Let me share screen here. I'll take but a second to get this up. Show you a few pictures. So this is some of the towers that were there. Look at that mess. So this is some pictures of the power plant that exploded. It was actually an explosion. Okay. Here's the reactor here that blew. See that smoke that come out of that reactor? That went up approximately a mile high, 1 kilometer high, up into the atmosphere. 1 mile high, that smoke went from the explosion. Look at that, it's crazy, ain't it? Chernobyl power plant, nuclear power plant over in Ukraine. Let me show you a few more pictures of that, so you get a really good idea of what happened here. And we'll talk about it some more. I think this third trumpet's critical for us to understanding not only what this third trumpet is, but also the second trumpet and the first trumpet. It pretty much proves what they are as well. Okay. So here's that little town. You can see it's desolate, abandoned, desolate. Nothing can live there, man. They say that this place won't be able to sustain life for 100 years, at least 100. At least 100 years before they'll be able to do anything with that. I don't know if I can. Yeah, let's see. There you go. Chernobyl, Ukraine. And I don't know, you can say that this was like a thriving little place at one time, right? They probably all made a good living, that people that lived there. You know, it was a thriving little community before the disaster took place. See, it's all abandoned now. You can see where they had a little Ferris wheel there and little entertainment area. All abandoned now. Just left. No life other than animals wandering onto it. There you go. They blew the cap off of it. I'm sure the cap got blowed off. I think that cap weighed 2 million pounds or something like that. Got knocked off crooked on there. Okay, so anyway, you get the point, right? So the contamination from this is pretty far and wide. Let me show you. So this is what they call the exclusion zone. See the red where it says exclusion zone? And there's that little town, Pripyat, where most of the people that worked there lived there. That exclusion zone was contaminated, nuclear fallout and everything right through there. Really bad. They call it the exclusion zone. And unfortunately, the winds blew that stuff all over the place. The wind and the rain spread that all over the place over there in Europe. It's a lot worse than people even know. So here you go. So there's the Chernobyl, and the winds and the rain spread it all through Europe, contaminated most of Europe with this nuclear fallout and chemicals out of that. All right. So you can see how widespread the disaster is. It's just a total mess. And I'll show you one more, and then we'll get back to it now. So here's more of a map of the exclusion zone. And you can see where it's pretty much spread out through all of Europe there. Just a big mess. Okay. Chernobyl nuclear disaster zone, exclusion zone. So what happened was on April 26th, 1986, at about 1:30 a.m. in the morning, a Russian scientist was in charge of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant on that shift. And this scientist decided he was going to conduct some experiments. And so in order to do this particular experiment, he had to disable some of the safety features. But he thought it would be okay, so he went ahead and disabled them in order to perform his experiments. And he disabled the safety features, and then he gave the command to raise the rods, which allowed the nuclear process to begin. So when he was watching his meters, he didn't catch it in time that the meltdown began. So within about 30 seconds, his tension was on his meters. So in about 30 seconds or so, the power plant began to heat up and the reactor began to overheat. And suddenly, there was these powerful explosions took place. Okay, the first explosion knocked the concrete lid off the power plant. It weighed about 2 million pounds. It knocked it down off the power plant, and it came back down, and it was cocked. And then the second explosion drove a nuclear cloud into the atmosphere approximately 1 mile into the air, and leaving the lid cocked. It left the atmosphere open to a full nuclear fire. They were not aware that they had just witnessed the worst nuclear disaster in the history of the world. Before it was over, there would be 10 times as much nuclear radiation released at Chernobyl as was released at the bombing of Hiroshima in World War II. So here's what happened next. The workers didn't know what was going on. So they heard this big explosion and they went running down to the source of the sound. Two of the workers pulled the door open and found themselves staring directly into a nuclear fire. It was so incredibly hot when they opened the door that it thrust them back, knocked them down, and they fell to the floor where they knew the coolest air would be. And they laid there until the heat somewhat dissipated, because now the lid was off the nuclear reactor and all the heat was going up. They were finally able to get up and made it to the nurses' station, which was about a block away. By the time they arrived at the nurses' station, their skin was hanging off their arms like ribbons. Both of those technicians died within a very short amount of time. But that's not all that happened. Immediately, because of the level of this emergency, they dispatched fire trucks from all over the place. They came from everywhere. Many of the firemen did not realize that they were actually signing their own death warrants by going there. They were fighting a full nuclear fire. Fire trucks and helicopters came from all over the place in to help, and many of them are still there today as monuments. All these monuments are built there as well, in honor of the people who bravely fought that fire. But even though many of them died, fought that fire, died within 30 days or so. And the ones who did survive suffered all kinds of ramifications of their exposure to this high level of radiation. As time went along, all the equipment was brought in. The fire trucks that were brought in to fight the nuclear fire became so contaminated with radiation that they had to bring in bulldozers and bury them. And then in the process, the bulldozers absorbed so much radiation that they had to bring in more bulldozers to bury the bulldozers. So it was a horrific thing. The world's worst nuclear disaster. They were fighting these, trying to put out the fire with helicopters, bringing in, dumping water onto the fire. And many of the pieces of equipment, the fire trucks, the bulldozers, the helicopters, they were all left there and abandoned at that nuclear disaster site because they were so contaminated that they couldn't use them anywhere else. So they were dumping all this water into the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in an attempt to put this fire out. Chernobyl then afterwards became a ghost town, uninhabited. Ghost town, really. So that little town of Pripyat of about 40,000 people, they were made up of the workers that lived there, were all gone. That's a no man's land now. It's been declared off limits by the government because no one can live there. Everything is highly contaminated. Much of the vegetation does not grow there anymore. To live there would be to live at your own risk, the risk of your own life. Wild animals do stray in, come in there, but that's about it. The waters made the Chernobyl nuclear accident very deadly. Here's what happened. When the nuclear cloud was driven 1 mile into the air, the winds caught the cloud and they carried it away. First of all, into Sweden, then into Italy, then into Germany, then into Great Britain. During this time, it began to rain. No one knows whether the nuclear explosion had anything to do with all that rain or not, but it did rain for about 4 or 5 days continuously. The result was it brought all the nuclide cesium-137 down to the earth. And everywhere rains fell, it created what's called brownouts. There's many places in Europe today where nothing will grow. And they estimate that nothing will grow in these brownout areas for at least 100 years. Furthermore, the rivers filled up with this nuclide cesium-137, And anybody that drank this water, they ingested this nuclide. So what happens when Celsium-137 is ingested? It goes into your bone marrow. So understand, this rain came down, filled the waters of Europe, and it was radioactive. And everything it touched became radioactive. There was a herd of reindeer being raised for consumption in Europe, about 100,000 reindeer, a large herd of them, and all of them had to be put down and killed because they became radioactive from this rain. There's never been anything like it, folks, ever in the history of the world, ever. So since this was the greatest nuclear disaster the world has ever known, and there's never been anything like it in the history of the world, why should we be surprised that it's located right here in prophecy, written in prophecy in the scriptures? We shouldn't be surprised that it's here. Now, this Celsium-137 has a half-life of about 30 years. And many of the children especially were infected because they ingested this nuclide. One of the things that Celsium-137 does, it attacks your thyroid gland. In the area of that small town, Pripyat, that area around there in Ukraine, the thyroid cancer is about 248 times the normal thyroid cancer rate, and many people are still suffering today. Altogether, as a result of the Chernobyl nuclear accident of April 26, 1987, about 125,000 people have died. 125,000 people have died. The scientists and the doctors estimate that around 2 million people are infected by this radioactive material. And eventually what happens is this Celsium-137 lays in your bone marrow, but it will eventually cause a person to have cancer. So the third trumpet sounded. This third trumpet sounded on April 26th, 1986, folks. 1986. You want to mark that down. 1986, the third trumpet sounded when this Chernobyl nuclear disaster site, wormwood, poisoned the waters. So when did the second trumpet sound then? If the third trumpet sounded in 1986, well, obviously, they would be before the third trumpet. The second trumpet and the first trumpet would have to be before the third trumpet, obviously. Right? So that helps us. And so if the third trumpet sounded in 1986, and it was in fact was the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, then the second trumpet and the first trumpet had to sound before that. Ask yourself that question. When did if the third trumpet sounded in 1986, when did the second trumpet sound? Let's get a look at the second trumpet now, the sounding of that second trumpet. It's found in Revelation chapter 8, verse 8 and 9. It says, and the second messenger sounded what looked like a great mountain burning with fire, was thrown into the sea. And the third of the sea became blood. And a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. So this second trumpet then, that had to sound before this third trumpet, could be none other than World War II. Because World War II is, in fact, the greatest disaster the world has ever known. Number one, greatest disaster the world has ever known. 52 million people died in World War II. 52 million. So how many ships participated in World War II? And how many of them were sunk? Now, we ain't talking about a third of all the ships in the entire world, including canoes and kayaks here. We're talking about how many ships participated, their navies participated in the war. And so, how many ships participated in World War II? And how many of those ships were sunk? And so the figure is that there were 105,127 ships that participated in World War II. And out of those 105,127 ships, 36,387 of them were sunk. Now do the math. That's about 1/3 of the ships, spot on the money, right on the money, right on the dot. So 1/3 of the ships were destroyed then, according to these figures. All right. And so there you go. A third, 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. Okay. But the rest of the prophecy says that there would be a great mountain burning with fire, cast into the sea, into the seas. So what could this be? What could John be describing here? A great mountain burning with fire? Well, if you look at pictures, let me see if I can find, I know I got some here somewhere. If you look at pictures here of a nuclear explosion, they look like huge mountains on fire. And that is how John would have described them, not knowing what they were. I mean, we can only, okay, so here's one. Let me share screen this with you. Now, put yourself in John's shoes. You don't know what a nuclear bomb is. You never seen one, never heard of one. And then you saw this. How would you describe it? There you go. Does that look like a mountain on fire to you? A huge mountain on fire? I'd say that's a pretty good description from old John here that wouldn't know what it was. It looks like a huge mountain on fire. Let's look at another one. I think John did a pretty good job of describing that. Yeah, nuclear blast, really. See if I can get you another one up here. This may have been like the one he saw here. I don't know. I'm not sure what John saw, but this one here sure may have been it. Look at that. How about that? Look like a huge mountain on fire to you? Okay. So I think we all got the idea there what that nuclear blast would look like, going all the way up like that. Just a big, giant, huge ball of fire, and then mushrooming as it peaks in altitude. The old famous mushroom that we're all familiar with. So there we go. All right, so why shouldn't it be that what John saw here was the first nuclear bomb dropped on the human race? Why wouldn't that be in Revelation? Why would that not be part of the book of Revelation? Such a dramatic event as a nuclear bomb dropped on the human race. Should be. Why should we be surprised to find that event in scriptures leading up to the second coming of Yahusha? And why shouldn't we think that it's incredible that the World War II, the greatest war the world's ever known by far, with 52 million people dead, is not written in the prophecy of scriptures leading up to the second coming of Yahusha? Why would that be so incredible? I mean, what a huge event in human history. Why would it not be in prophecy? If the prophecy was true of the events leading up to the return of Yahusha in the end times, from the year 4000 to the year 6000, why would that not be included? The greatest disaster the world has ever known. By far, 52 million dead. Would that not be in scripture somewhere? Why would that be so incredible that we would think that that would not be in here? We have to realize, folks, that these prophecies have to do with our reality. They only sound weird because old John was trying to explain to us things that he has seen that he didn't know what it was. He never had words for, but yet he tried to explain it. We have to understand this is about our reality. This is what the world, the events that are going to happen in our world that leads up to the second coming of Yahusha. So the second trumpet here, prophecy, what we're seeing here has to be describing a nuclear explosion. The nuclear explosion that John described as a huge mountain on fire, it was in fact the nuclear explosions at Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. So the second trumpet is World War II. Which would have happened before 1986. So it would be in sequence and precede the Chernobyl nuclear disaster area district disaster. And don't forget, the third of the ships were destroyed in World War II. A third of the ships that were involved in the military fight of World War II. So at this point, we should be quickly becoming convinced that the second trumpet was none other than World War II. So the question is then, if the third trumpet is the Chernobyl nuclear disaster of 1986, the worst nuclear disaster the world has ever known, and the second trumpet is World War II, describing the two nuclear explosions on Japan, then would the first trumpet be, could it be World War I then? Could it be World War I? Back to the scriptures, man. Revelations 8, verse 7 says, "And the first messenger sounded, and there came to be hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were thrown to the arets, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all the grass, green grass, was burned up." Okay, wow, huh? Okay, so let's see here now. Let me show you. Okay, so if the second trumpet is World War II, then it only stands to reason that the first trumpet would be World War I. Because up until the 20th century, the world had never seen a war with 1 million fatalities. And World War I comes along, and they nicknamed it the Great War, and there were 8.2 million dead. So up to this point, there had never been a war with 1 million fatalities at all, period, in the world. And all of a sudden now, World War I shows up, 20th century, and there's 8.2 million dead. So could this possibly be then the first trumpet, what it's talking about? Here's where it says, what does it mean? Where it says hail and fire mingled with blood. And there came to be hail and fire mixed with blood. If we think about the new implements of warfare, all the bombs, the artillery, the huge artillery guns, the huge guns, and also it says all green grass was burned up. Then we can begin to understand the magnitude of this new warfare, if you will, found in World War I. It was a huge event at the time that it took place. It was a huge event. Okay, so there's a thing, you can look it up yourself if you want, but it's called the scorched earth policy. And what happened was most of the battle occurring in World War I was between France and Germany. So there was this area in there where the policy of both nations was don't leave anything for the enemy. So don't leave anything, burn everything up. That way, if you lose the territory, you leave no resources for the enemy to live off of the land or live on this ground. So they were under orders to not to leave any crops. Don't even leave any green thing at all. Totally wipe it out, right? So this was called the scorched earth policy of World War I. So of course that's when biological and chemical weapons first came on the scene as well, and they were first used in World War I. So this was horrific. This was crazy stuff. Okay, never before seen. So the American troops and the Allied troops and the German troops all engaged in biological and chemical warfare for the first time in the history of the world, World War I. It was absolutely horrific, terrible, what they went through as these men fought this horrible battle in Europe. So when we look at this prophecy and look at what happened in World War I, it makes sense that World War I would be the sounding of the first trumpet. So if we summarize it all, then so the overview of the first three trumpets, this first trumpet would be World War I with 8.2 million dead and their scorched earth policy implemented, where they wiped out all living things, all green things. They were ordered to wipe them out. Prior to this, there had never been one war in the history of the world with 1 million dead. And this world produced 8.2 million dead. World never seen anything like it up to that point. In the nearly 6,000 years of recorded human history, not one war was there 1 million people dead ever up to World War I. And all of a sudden, we have this war that's labeled the Great War, and 8.2 million people died in that war. Big event in world history. Big event. I'll show you. Let me screen share this again. So this is what they call the red zone, if you will. And this is over there around France, Belgium, Germany. And you can see the red there is the rogue zone, if you will, or the red zone. Nothing lives there. It's totally, even now, it's uninhabitable. And then the yellow zone and the green zone and that purple zone, pretty much no human beings can live in those different areas. Pretty much wiped out, inhabitable by human beings still today. The rogue zone, they call it, or the red zone. This is what it kind of looked like at the end of the war. These were German trenches. I think we've all seen this before. Not one green thing was left alive, not even grass, not a blade, no, not one blade of grass, no trees, no nothing. They just totally destroyed this land. This is horrific, man. This is more bigger than you can even imagine, really. This is what where the bombs was hitting everything. This is kind of what it looks like now. This is the rogue zone, they call it. There you go. That's what it's kind of looking like now. It is still inhabitable because of the chemicals and everything that was laid out all over there. They still can't inhabit it. So you get the point there. Now, so here we go. The World War I. All of a sudden, we have the Great War, 8.2 million dead. Then the second trumpet blows. And then here comes World War II. World War I was supposed to be the war to end all wars. 8.2 million dead. They said, we can't have that. We can't do that anymore. So here, but then in just a short few years later, here comes World War II. So World War I began 1914. World War II began 1939. So here come World War II producing not 1 million dead, not 8.2 million dead, but 52 million people dead. And 1/3 of the military ships involved in the war were destroyed. And there was a great mountain burning with fire, what John says, which is no doubt describing the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So everything seems to fit, does it not? Then, of course, we have the third trumpet, wormwood, or in Russian, Chernobyl. If you get your hands on a Ukrainian Bible for reference, you can look in a Russian dictionary and find it, Chernobyl's wormwood, or you can get your hands on a Ukrainian Bible, if you will, and look it up, and it will say Chernobyl instead of wormwood. So the third trumpet, Chernobyl. Christianity likes to teach, and I think most of us probably heard that all the trumpets would exist in the final 7-year period. They like to put the tribulation in a 7-year period. And they like to say that the 7 trumpets exist within that final 7-year period. I guess each year a trumpet gets blown. This is what they try to teach, But there's really no proof of that, and it don't even sound reasonable if you really think about it. But that's just a theory that they have embraced, that Christianity has embraced. But I think if we apply a little bit of common sense here, we can see that this is not true. There's just no way that these 7 trumpets exist in the final 7-year period that they say is the tribulation period. Of course, they interject the rapture into that as well, saying that everybody will be raptured before those final 7 years or those 7 trumpets blow. There's no truth in any of that, man. There's no proof of that. They can't even explain that. That can't be true. So the third trumpet has to be Chernobyl, nuclear disaster, which happened in April 26, 1986. So we have World War I, 1914, the first trumpet. The second trumpet, World War II, 1939. The third trumpet would be Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986. Don't forget the word Chernobyl means wormwood. If you get your hands on a Ukrainian Bible, you would actually read it. It would say a star by the name of Chernobyl was cast into the earth. That's what it would say. It wouldn't say wormwood, it would say Chernobyl, a star named Chernobyl. Whereas this is the name of the star is called wormwood, it would say, in the Ukrainian Bible, it would say, and the name of the star is called Chernobyl. So here we have the third trumpet in the Chernobyl accident, which was the world's worst nuclear accident by far. Matter of fact, 10 times as much radiation. Are you hearing that? 10 times as much radiation was released at Chernobyl as was released at any other time in history, including the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima or Nagasaki. So once we realize all of this and apply a little bit of common sense here, and we realize all of this can fit into our reality, we can understand that we are looking at something amazing here tonight, right here in this prophecy within the scriptures of truth. We are seeing the history of mankind laid out right here in chapter 8 of Revelation. All the main disasters leading up to the return of Yahusha, right here in scriptures. We're looking at something amazing here, folks. If you want to, we can go to Christianity. Oh, that's going to happen in the final 7 years. Oh, this is that, and blah, 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 all this crazy stuff. This like that ain't even part of our reality happening. Is ridiculous. When we're cheating ourselves. Once we understand that John is describing all these major disasters, 8.2 million dead, 52 million dead, the worst nuclear disaster in the history of the world, we can understand that we are looking at something amazing here, folks. So now that we've done that, and you can see why I wanted to start at the third trumpet now, in order to establish what that second trumpet is and that first trumpet is, because Christianity they like to tell you straight up that first trumpet is not World War I. Oh, that can't be World War I. That's not World War I. They'd love to say that. But I think we've just proven that it is. The first trumpet is World War I. And the second trumpet is World War II. Is that a coincidence, folks, that the first trumpet coincides with World War I, the First World War, the first trumpet? Is it a coincidence that the second trumpet coincides with the Second World War, World War II, and the second trumpet? Is that a coincidence? Or is that prophecy? Is that Yahuwah letting us know, hey, the first trumpet's the first war, dummies. The second trumpet is the Second World War, dummies. Is it a coincidence? Or is it the power of Yahuwah being showed here in this prophecy? I say it's the power of Yahuwah being shown here. You want to believe from Christians, go ahead. But I don't. So here we go then now. Let's get a look now at the next trumpets, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Let's look at the next 4 trumpets. We've just discussed 1, 2, and 3. Now let's look at 4, 5, 6, and 7, if you will. I hope you all are getting a kick out of tonight's lesson. I know I am. Yeah, this is mind-blowing stuff, man. Okay, so we've learned so far that the first trumpet's World War I, the second trumpet is World War II, and the third trumpet was the nuclear accident, the worst the world has ever seen, in Chernobyl, Ukraine, in 1986, when 10 times as much radiation was released into the air than was unleashed at the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I'd like to mix it up here again just a little bit, kind of like we did before with the first 3. And in order to effectively communicate with you, because the 5th trumpet helps us to understand the 4th trumpet. So therefore, we're going to get out of order again, and we're going to skip that 4th trumpet, which is a hard one, and we're going to go to the 5th trumpet first. Okay? So I think by studying the 5th trumpet first, it'll help us to understand the 4th trumpet when we go back to it. Okay? So we're going to go to the 1st trumpet, the 5th trumpet first. This event is in Revelations 9, verse 1 and 2. Okay? It says, "And the 5th messenger sounded, and I saw a star from the heaven, which had fallen to the arets. And the key to the pit of the deep was given to it. And he opened the pit of the deep, and smoke went up out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun was darkened, also the air, because of the smoke of the pit. And out of the smoke locusts came upon them, as the scorpions of the arrest possessed authority." All right. Okay. Now, I'm pretty sure most of us, at least my age, will never forget the Gulf Wars. It came on us pretty quickly. 9/11, the bombing of the Twin Towers in New York City, and all that, and the Persian Wars that followed. Most of us will never forget those days. And that time period was 1990. So 1990, 1991. There was a dictator from Iraq, and he was called Saddam Hussein. Who could ever forget Saddam Hussein, right? Who was, of course, the president of Iraq, but he was a dictator. He was very mean to his people, and he lived high off the hog, So Saddam Hussein decided one day that he wanted to invade a little country called Kuwait. He wanted to invade Kuwait because Kuwait was oil rich. So he wanted to take control of the oil riches of Kuwait, which was kind of weird because Iraq was already very rich in oil themselves. But he wanted to take Kuwait, probably because he wanted to be even more rich. He's greedy. So he knew that he would become much richer if he took the oil fields in Kuwait. Okay. And so he would be that much richer because he had dreams of rebuilding, and this is important, rebuilding Babylon, believe it or not. Saddam Hussein had dreams of rebuilding the city of Babylon. That was his motive for invading Kuwait. So he even had pictures of himself taken acting as the king of Babylon. He wanted to be the king of Babylon, okay? He wanted to revise the Babylonian empire, and he wanted to be the king of Babylon, okay? So he wanted to rebuild the city of Babylon called Babel. All right, so he actually launched an effort to rebuild the city of Babylon, and a lot of us may remember that. It was all over the news at the time because he actually had pictures of himself taken depicting himself to be king of Babylon. So he had this uniform made up to look like Nebuchadnezzar. Way back in the ancient times, in somewhere Nebuchadnezzar lived somewhere around 586 BC, and he was one of the kings that destroyed Jerusalem, Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, and so here Saddam Hussein had a uniform made up to look like Nebuchadnezzar. Okay. From Babylon. And Saddam Hussein had these weird dreams of destroying Jerusalem again and getting rid of the nation of Israel completely. So not only did he want to revive Babylon and the city of Babel and become the king of Babylon, he made up a uniform to look like Nebuchadnezzar. He had plans on destroying Jerusalem again and getting rid of the nation of Israel. That's what his motive was. So he actually had this uniform made up for himself that looked like Nebuchadnezzar, and he actually stood in a chariot and had his picture taken. It was all over the news. I think a lot of us probably remembers that. So he thought that if he could take control of the oil fields of Kuwait and add it to what he already controlled in Iraq, that it would enable him or enrich him to have power, and he would become the premier power of the Middle East, the king of Babylon. That was his dream, his motive. The guy was crazy. So when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in the fall of 1990, when that happened, immediately the president at the time was George Herbert Walker Bush. Bush went to the United Nations and asked for a resolution against Saddam Hussein. So the United Nations passed the resolution, and 29 United Nation members devoted their troops or military supplies to the battle against Saddam Hussein. This battle, of course, this coalition was led by the American Army. So the coalition forces, or what they were calling the world community at the time, did march against Saddam Hussein, and they drove him out of Kuwait. All right, now Hussein thought he had a green light from the United States to take this action, but he didn't. He was misinformed or misunderstood. And so now, because of the action of the United States and the United Nations, Saddam Hussein became very angry. He became just like a madman. And so this madman knew that he was going to be forced out of Kuwait. And he knew he couldn't stand up before all that coalition power, the firepower of the United States of America, with all her allies with her. He knew that he was going to have to leave, but he had turned so angry that he had became a madman, and he wasn't going to go easy, and he didn't go easy. So what this madman did, he decided that since the United States was going to foil his dream of becoming Nebuchadnezzar and becoming the Empire of Babylon and destroying Jerusalem and rebuilding the Tower of Babel, he went nuts. And he decides he would set all the world's richest oil wells in Kuwait ablaze, at a tune of about 700 of them. So he decides he's going to set 700 of the world's richest oil deposits, wells, ablaze. And he did. And these oil wells of Kuwait were very productive, some of the best, finest oil in the world. And so he decided to set these 700 oil wells ablaze. And he did it. Crazy, madman. So now when these oil wells began to burn, they actually did, in fact, block the sun and the sky overhead for over 3 months. Over 3 months. Let me see if I can show you some pictures of that. I think I have some pictures of it. But I can remember when they were showing it on TV, how dark, it was. And it was even, or it was daylight at noon. Now, here's a picture of it. This is a picture of Kuwait when Saddam Hussein had set all the oil wells ablaze. Look at that. That's what it looked like, folks. Crazy, right? I want you to see this, because this is extremely important in understanding Revelations. Look at the sky. This is at noon. Understand, this is not nighttime here. This is in high noon, the middle of the day. And look at the sky. It's not the sun and the sky blocked out. Yeah, it is. And it was this way for 3 full months, a quarter of a year. The sun was darkened, also the air, because of the smoke of the pit. Listen to that. The pit of the deep, which is the oil reserve. Do you know that the oil that they're pumping up out of that ground is like a big giant lake? So if you can imagine, say, Lake Erie or one of the Great Lakes underneath the ground, it's all oil. And they're pumping that out, trying to pump all the oil out of that underground oil lake, if you will. All right. And that's what they're doing. Okay. So look at that. It's a pit. The oil is in the pit. It's in the ground. It's in the earth. It's in the center of the earth, if you will. The smoke went up out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. Doesn't that look like the smoke of a great furnace? How else would you describe it? And the sun was darkened, also the air. Yeah, the air's dark because of the smoke of the pit. Does that not fit the definition that John is describing with the fifth trumpet? I say it is. I think it's a very accurate description. Let me show you some more. Okay. Here's one. This also is in the daytime. Madman, Saddam Hussein, the madman, the destroyer. There you go. That's in the daytime. Look at that. The sun was darkened, also the air, because of the smoke of the pit. And he opened the pit of the deep, and smoke went up out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun was darkened, also the air, because of the smoke of the pit. Okay, so this fifth trumpet obviously would be after the third trumpet, after Chernobyl nuclear disaster of 1986. So when did this happen? 1990, 1991. So we have the third trumpet, 1986, this fifth trumpet, 1991, 90-91. So that gives us the years for the fourth trumpet. It has to fall between 1986 and 1990, that 4-year period. So that helps for us to understand that fourth trumpet when we put it on that timeline. If you're picking up what I'm laying down. Okay, so now, let me see now. Okay, here we go. Look at this one. This also in the daytime. Wait a minute, that was the wrong one. Why didn't that one come up? Wow. Here we go. There you go. How'd you like to be over there fighting that? Look at that. You guys had to wear those fireproof uniforms and those gas masks in order just to be out there. The heat was so intense, it was actually melting their trucks and their equipment. They had to continuously spray water on their trucks so that the metal on the trucks wouldn't melt. That's how hot those blazes were. I'm going to show you a couple more because this is real important. You got to get this one. You have to get this. It's in Kuwait. This is in the middle of the daytime here as well. Look at that. Don't it look like midnight? That's in the daytime. So you can see here that these 700 wells did, in fact, block the sun and the sky and the air for over 3 months. You're looking at pictures, folks, in the daytime here, but it looks like it's midnight, doesn't it? I'll show you one more, or two more, whatever. Fascinating here, isn't it? Daggone it, what'd I just do? Uh-oh, I did something weird. Oh, there we go. Okay. Slow down here, getting ahead of myself. Dark at Noon here is the name of this one. This actually was on the front of a magazine, I believe. This picture was actually found on the front of a magazine, I think. But yeah, Dark at Noon is what they called this picture. Look, you can see the sun now. You can see see the sun? It's almost straight up. See that? Noon. Look at that. How that's blocking out the sun, man, and the sky. Saddam Hussein, he's a madman, set all them wells on fire like that. Boy, the pollution, phenomenal. But you can see the sun here in this picture, right here. And this was called Dark at Noon. This picture here. I think it was on the front of a magazine, if I'm not mistaken. And y'all are getting the idea here. Show you one more. And we're going to get moving. Look at that. Crazy, huh? So you can see the, the horrific disaster that this caused for the region. I mean, crazy, man. This was horrific. All right, so you get the point. So these pictures you were looking at here were in the daytime, folks. It looked like midnight, but it was in the daytime. So the fires from these wells, man, were so hot that they were actually was reaching around 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, man. So it became very difficult for the firefighters to fight these fires. They even had to spray water on their fire trucks continuously to keep the metal of the fire trucks from melting. And so for 3 long months, these fires belched smoke into the atmosphere. What you were seeing here was the sky and the sun being blocked out by reason of the smoke coming from the pits, these oil pits. Make no mistake, the oils are in pits. So why is this so important? This crazy madman, this lighting of these 700 wells that blocked out the sun and the air and the sky. Why is it so important to us in 2025? This happened way back in 1990, right? 35 years ago. So why is it so important? Because the scripture prophecy says this, and I don't know of any incident in all of human history that could fulfill this particular prophecy. There is none. This is the only event, the only incident in all of the human history that could fulfill this particular prophecy of the 5th trumpet. Because the scripture specifically says that the sun and the sky were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. Because of the smoke of the pit. And those are oil pits, folks. That the oil is in a pit. So now if the oil is coming out of the earth, it's in a pit. Okay? Then maybe this is teaching us that the bottomless pit refers to the middle of the earth. Is that possible? You better believe it. But there's more. There's more to it. So let's look at the rest of this passage. In Revelations 9:3, it says, and out of the smoke, locusts came upon the arrests, and authority was given to them as the scorpions of the arrest possess authority or power. And it was said to them that they shall not harm the grass of the arrests or any green thing or any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of Yahuwah on their foreheads. Okay. Their shape, okay, was the shape of locusts. Okay, out of the smoke, locusts came. So the shape were of locusts. They were like unto horses prepared for battle. And on their heads were as it were crowns like gold. Down in 7 here. And the locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. And on their heads were crowns like gold, and their faces were like the faces of men. And they had hair like women's hair, and their teeth were like the teeth of a lion, of lion's teeth. And then it says they had breastplates like breastplates of iron. And the sound of their wings was like the sound of many chariots, of many horses running into battle. So he is definitely connecting this vision to war. There's definitely a war going on. Battle, chariots, and so he's describing a battle, a war here. Okay, it has to be. So when we read this, it's a fairly lengthy passage, this 5th trumpet, isn't it? Compared to the first 4, it's very lengthy. Okay. So we got to stop and think, what's old John telling us here? What's John saying here to us? What is he trying to explain to us? What is John trying to describe to us here in this passage of the 5th trumpet? Okay? And we have to remember, it's very important, critical in understanding these prophecies, to remember that this was written 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years ago. Okay? But John is seeing these locusts, what he's describing as a locust, having breastplates of iron. Iron. He knew what iron was. They had iron back then, with faces of men. The sound of their wings was the sound of many chariots or many horses running into battle. So with that description, what do you think John was actually seeing here, folks? Could it be that he was seeing helicopters? The sound of their wings, those helicopter blades, they're very loud if you've ever been around one. Could it be that John was seeing jet airplanes, jet fighters, jet bombers? All of this that John wrote here is written symbolically because he didn't have any words. He didn't know what to call what he was seeing, man. So he called them with what they looked like to him. So what in the world could he have been seeing that looked like a locust. Well, here, let me show you a picture of something that perhaps maybe John, not knowing what it was, thought it looked like a locust to him. So what could it be? Maybe it was this. Does that not look like a locust? That looks like a locust. I think it does. Look at the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the wings, you know. I think it looks a lot like a locust. I mean, I think I would describe it as a locust. John had never seen a helicopter, nor had he ever heard the word helicopter. He'd never seen a jet airplane either. Matter of fact, John had no clue what he was seeing or what they were. Not a clue in the world. To him, maybe this was an iron locust coming out of the burning pit. Can you imagine seeing one of these locusts flying through that smoke where all those wells were on fire and the sun was blackened and the air was blackened, and seeing one of these coming through there? Boy, John must have thought he'd taken a look at hell itself. Locusts made of iron, you know, smoke coming out of the pit, blocking the sun in the sky. But he must have, can you imagine what he thought he was seeing? Crazy, man. He had no clue what these things were. But that does look like a locust. It really does. Crazy. John said, these are locusts, and they got breastplates of iron. But they have faces of men, and the sound of their rings is the sound of many chariots going into battle. Let's take another look at what he may have seen in this description, in this vision that he was describing. I mean, I don't know if this is what John actually saw, man, but let's just take a look at some of these other helicopters and equipment, war equipment here. Look at this one. Okay, so looks like a teeth of a lion. Looks like a face of a man up here in this teeth here of a lion, mouth here, and up here inside this, there's a face of a man. You see a man's face there. Look at the minigun and the missiles. You could have saw these as the stingers, or even that little blade back there that spins around on the tail. Maybe you could see that as helping lift off, you know, and spinning around like crazy. Look at that. What he must have thought, boy, he must have thought, what the heck is this? Show you some more here. This is no doubt, you know, if you never knew what this was, you would be in shock seeing this stuff, man. Look at this. There's that guy inside that helicopter. Look at it. Look at that. He looks like he's got a mouth of a lion and the head of a man. I mean, what would you think? Remember, John didn't know what the goggles were. He didn't know what that helmet was. He had no clue what he was looking at. I mean, he could have thought man turned into some kind of crazy looking beast seeing this. Oh boy, I mean, just, you know, on and on, really. Up. Yeah, I don't know why that keeps doing that, but here we go. Show you a few of these. This fifth trumpet's important, so we got to understand it, what we're talking about here. This is all during, the Persian Gulf Wars, It's what all these pictures are, matter of fact. Look at that. What if John saw that? So here we go. The sky's black from all the smoke. The sun's blackened. The sky's blackened. He sees fire shooting out of this helicopter all over. Look like it's coming out of his butt, don't it? And it looks like a locust with all these fires shooting out, bombs shooting out all over the friggin' place out of this helicopter's tail. No wonder he thought fire was in their tail. The authority was given to them as the scorpions of the earth possessed authority. Crazy, right? They looked like horses prepared for battle, and their heads were crowns like gold, and their faces were like the faces of men. With women's hair, teeth were like lions' teeth, breastplates of iron. Their wings was like a sound of chariots of many horses running into battle. They have tails like scorpions and stings. And in their tail is the authority to harm men 5 months. Look at that. How else would you describe it? That's a pretty good description. That could be exactly what John saw right there as she described that. That's mind-blowing, man. All that firepower coming out of the back of that thing, out of its tail, it looks like. Yeah, crazy, man. And, mind-blowing, man. Look at that. Horses, chariots and horses leading the battle. Look at that. How'd you like to see that coming at you? I know I would. Let's see what else we got here. Yeah, look at this one. This is in Iraq. Actually, that looks like the oil fields in Kuwait. Really, what that is. Look at that. Look how black the air is. Look at that, man. The sun's blotted out. The air's black. The sun's blackened. And there, look at that jet flying through there. That must have blown his marbles. You see something like that. Yeah. And what did all these things he must have saw, Once we're looking at these pictures, I got to give him an A plus for describing these things like he did. Look at that one. Mean looking. Looks like a lion's teeth. To me, it looks like a shark. You may not ever seen a shark. I don't know. That's mean looking though. Woo. What else we got here? Look at this crazy one here. This one's really weird looking. Look at that thing. A tank. Look at that tank back there, and then that looks like definitely looks like a locust. Crazy looking thing like that. And you can see out there above those big things that look like eyeballs there, or I mean right below here, these cockpits. Be men and faces of a man in there. You could see a man's face. I could see where he would call these big giant propellers up here, these blades, the women's hair. I mean, I can see that. Why he would say that. So there you go. I think we all get the point here now. Crazy stuff, right? Okay. And so taking a look at these helicopters, it's not too hard to understand what John may have been telling us here. When these men and women of the armed forces that are in the service, these pilots of these helicopters and airplanes or jets, they like to paint up their helicopters and jets to make them look more interesting and more scary to the enemy. So we can see these mouth of a lion thing, and they definitely look like locusts, don't they, to you? Do they look like locusts to you? I got to admit, they look like locusts to me. Look like a lot of locusts, actually. And I mean, it blows me away to see them. Look like a whole, like a swarm. Let me show you a swarm of locusts here. Watch this. Look at this. This looks like a swarm of locusts coming at you. So if you would see something like that, would you describe it as locusts with breastplates? Looks like a swarm of locusts to me. Look out now. I think we're starting to understand what the man was seeing. So you got to admit, man, look like a swarm of locusts. And you can see that these helicopters definitely have breastplates of iron and faces of men. I mean, you can see that the man's in it. You can see it, the man's face in the cockpit and the breastplates of iron. You can see why he said that. So it appears to me that's exactly what John was seeing. And he was talking about warfare in the 20th century. There's no doubt about it. He was talking about warfare because he mentions battle all the time. So that's not all the prophecy, however, in this fifth trumpet. It goes on a little bit further, doesn't it? Let's get a look at it. So in 11, go down to 11. It says, and they have over them a sovereign, the messenger of the pit of the deep, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek, he has the name Apollyon. Okay, so if we look up in the dictionary, it defines both the Hebrew Abaddon as destroyer and the Greek Apollyon as means destroyer as well. So the Hebrew Abaddon means the destroyer, and the Greek Apollyon here also means the destroyer. So both of those words mean the destroyer. See, but in the Greek, his name was Apollyon. In the Hebrew, abandoned, because both of these names means destroyer, okay, in both tongues. Some translations even actually say they had a king over them named the destroyer. Some of the translations just come straight out and say that. And at the time, this was all being shown on the news medias, on the television and stuff back in the 90s there. All the reporters that were over there reporting on all this and stuff at the time actually called Saddam Hussein the destroyer. They would say Saddam the destroyer Hussein when they were talking about him, which is pretty wild. But abandon and Apollyon both means the destroyer. And here the reporters at the time were calling Saddam the destroyer Hussein. The newspaper, and there were newspapers back then, believe it or not, called the Jerusalem Post. This particular newspaper had a story written up in it, and it was a human interest story in the middle of the Jerusalem Post newspaper. And it was all about the last family out of Baghdad, the last Jewish family, if you will, out of Baghdad. And the Jerusalem Post was doing an interview at the time with this family that had just arrived in Jerusalem, the last family out of Baghdad, right? And they just arrived in Jerusalem. And what was so interesting about this lady, about this, is the lady relating this story was telling about how when Saddam Hussein's mother was pregnant with Saddam, that she was having a horrible, very painful pregnancy. And the Iraqi doctors recommended for her to get an abortion, but she did not. And she did not want to get an abortion. So Saddam Hussein's mother moved to the section of Baghdad where the finest doctors were available. And these doctors were, believe it or not, were Jewish doctors. And the Jewish doctors nursed her through her pregnancy with Saddam Hussein. She was bedridden and she was almost constantly in pain with him. And she almost died several times. So the Jerusalem Post, inside the Jerusalem Post, it said when he was born, she decided to name him Saddam because Saddam means destroyer. And he almost destroyed her when she was pregnant with him. So she decided to name him Saddam, which means destroyer. So you got to think, man, that was this a coincidence? Particularly when we know that the Arabic word for Saddam means destroyer, and the scripture here in the Hebrew, Abaddon, and the Greek Apollyon also both mean destroyer, right here in prophecy. Is that a coincidence? I think not. Are you picking up what I'm laying down on that? I hope you are. So what I'm saying is that the scriptures, it says a man by the name of Destroyer is going to unleash the oil fields, the bottomless pit of the oil fields, and the sun and the air will be darkened by the reason of the smoke. Paraphrasing, of course, but that's what it's saying. So we have to come to a reasonable conclusion here about this fifth trumpet. And that is that this fifth trumpet sounded in 1990, 1991-ish, during this invasion of Kuwait. And Saddam Hussein, the destroyer, setting 700 oil wells ablaze and causing a great war to take place. Okay? I say we come to that. That's a reasonable conclusion. And it fits into the timeline. It's after 1986, and it was. Okay, so now that we've went through that, let's go back and take a look at that fourth trumpet. Revelations 8, verse 12. It states, and the fourth messenger sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them was darkened, and a third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. Okay. So this one here is a little bit squirrely, but I think we can relate here because there were actually two Gulf Wars. There was the first one, and then the second one. And so the first one was when they bombed the Twin Towers. And then the second one was when Saddam invaded Kuwait. So that happened in, wait a minute now. I'm going to get off track here. This is all about, that's given to us for the fourth trumpet here, is a very short passage here. Okay. But this part that says, let's just look at it. The third part of the stars, the third of the sun, the third part of the moon was smitten, and the sun didn't shine for the third part of the day. The moon did not shine for 1/3 part of the night, right? And this seems to correlate with what Yahusha said in Matthew. Okay. So Matthew chapter 24, verse 22. And it says there that, and except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be delivered. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. So when we look at that, and then we look at this third and third and third and third, it kind of seems like it's telling us that somewhere between the third trumpet and the fifth trumpet, that Yahuwah is going to shorten the days. Okay? And so by putting that together there, seeing that has these days actually been shortened, we have to see that maybe Yahuwah has speeded everything up, but we just don't realize it. Okay? But it could be that's already a done deal here. Okay, so that the days will be shortened because he made everything speed up. And I know that during this time frame between 1986 and 1990, everybody, and I mean everybody, was running around saying, man, they're just seeing enough hours in the day to get anything done. And everybody was kind of saying, man, don't it seem like the days are shorter? The days are just flying by. And people don't talk like that too much anymore. But back in that time period, everybody was talking like that. I mean, everybody. So think about that for just a minute. And
we know in Daniel 12, he says that from the abomination of desolation till the culmination of everything, in other words, to the battle of Armageddon, is going to be from the time the end times to the battle of Armageddon will be 1,290 days from the tribulation to Armageddon. So that's almost 3.5 years. And then it says, blessed is he that waits and comes to the 1,335th day. So is that telling us, hinting that the days were got speeded up by Yahuwah to the point where it was cut short, 1,335 to 1,290? Maybe. That's a 45-day difference. Did he speed time up that much? Well, if Yahuwah did speed time up, men wouldn't notice it. There's no way we'd notice it. Although, like I said, people were talking about, don't it seem like there's not enough hours in the day to get anything done? Doesn't it seem like the days are shorter? That was a big conversation back in that time period. But really, in reality, we wouldn't notice it anyway, even if he did, because Einstein's theory of relativity, states that time and speed are relative one to another. So in other words, when one speeds up, the other one speeds up with it. So we wouldn't really notice it. But since the third trumpet sounded, and we know that Chernobyl, nuclear disaster area, we know that third trumpet sounded, and the fifth trumpet sounded, which is the Gulf Wars. It seems like to me that the fourth trumpet also sounded as well. And so when did the fourth trumpet sound then? If it did sound, when did it sound? Well, we know that the third trumpet sounded in 1986. The first trumpet sounded in 1914. The second trumpet sounded in 1939. The third trumpet sounded in 1986. We know that the fifth trumpet we just talked about sounded in 1990, 1991-ish. So then, is there any major event between that time period of the third trumpet sounding in 1986 and the fifth trumpet sounding in 1991 that could maybe be related to the shortening of the days? And the only thing that we can come up with that happened in that time period, that was a major event, would be the New World Order began, the rebirth of the Holy Roman Empire. So the New World Order began when? November 9th, 1989. And that's when the Berlin Wall fell on November 9th, 1989. So the New World Order began when the Berlin Wall fell. That was in November 9th, 1989. So that was the greatest event, major event, world event that happened between 1986 and 1990. At the time, you could hear the world leaders, if you were listening to them on the TV and stuff, and they were talking about the New World Order. George Bush went on there and said the New World Order has begun. We're under a New World Order. And Tony Blair, who was the leader of the United England, and he even created a foundation, a new foundation called the Tony Blair Foundation. But that foundation, even Blair mentioned the New World Order in his speeches as well. But he created this new foundation called the Tony Blair Foundation. If some of you may recall that. And it was a combination of interfaithism and globalization, which is really weird because that's exactly the mix that's going to be taking place at the return of Yahusha. And so the combination of interfaithism and globalization, and Tony Blair said during one of his speeches that globalization began with the fall of the Berlin Wall. That was his exact quote. So this was very much a major event or a pivotal event in world history. The birth of the New World Order. Okay, so maybe that's when Yahuwah speeded everything up. I think that probably is correct, and I think it would fit in there is within that 1986 and that 1990. It's the only major pivotal event that I can think of in that year, that period, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the beginning of the New World Order. All right, so yeah, that fourth one's a little bit of a curveball, but I think it somewhat makes sense. Maybe Yahuwah speeded time up, man. So now let's get a look at the sixth trumpet. The sixth trumpet is in Revelations 9, verse 13. The sixth messenger sounded, and I heard a voice saying, release the four Malachim, those having been bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four Malachim, those having been prepared for the hour and the day and the moon and year, were released to kill a third of mankind. And the number of the armies of the horsemen was 200 million. And I heard the number of them. Okay. So this is a big one, right? This sixth trumpet war, which we'll call World War III, has not sounded yet, obviously. But this is a big one. This prophecy tells us three huge things. There's going to be a war, and that war will kill 1/3 of mankind. That's in verse 15. We're released to kill 1/3 of mankind. 1/3 of mankind right now, as we speak, is roughly 2.4 billion people. So this is a big prophecy, man. So we're going from World War I, 8.2 million, to World War II, 52 million, to World War III, 2.4 billion people. This is a big prophecy here, folks. And this is the trumpet we're waiting on. So the first 5 trumpets have blown. And we're waiting on the sixth one to blow. And the second thing is that we know that this war is going to start from the Euphrates River basin, the Euphrates River area. And the Euphrates River is in the Middle East. We all know that. And thirdly, the number of one of these armies that will be participating in World War III will be 200 million soldiers strong. 200 million people in that army. Okay. Now let's make sure we understand this war, this Third World War. It starts from the Euphrates River. There are 4 Malachim bound in the great river Euphrates. When they're loosed, it triggers this war that will, once they're released, will kill 1/3 of mankind. And there will be a 200 million man army involved. So let's get a quick look at this Euphrates River. Notice here that the Euphrates River then starts in Turkey. The snow in the mountains in Turkey melts off, runs down, and creates the Euphrates River. So it begins in Turkey. It goes down through Syria, then down basically all the way through Iraq, through the middle of Iraq. And then it empties out into the Persian Gulf, where the border of Iran and Iraq meet together there. It just touches the tip of Iran as it empties out into the Persian Gulf. And this is where Scripture suggests that this war will begin from. So I don't know if you've noticed it or not, but there's a lot of turmoil over there in the Middle East right now as we speak. And it's been there for quite a while now, since the 1990. I just want to say that it's been there for quite a long time. And I know that you're hearing people say peace. There's peace in the air, right? Donald Trump's going to stop all the wars in the world, right? And so there's hints of peace in the world right now because of Donald Trump. He's a great negotiator. He's going to stop the wars, right? But I got a feeling that undoubtedly these wars will continue, at least to some degree. But Scripture says that this Third World War, this Sixth Trumpet War, that's going to kill 1/3 of mankind, is going to start right there in the Middle East. That's where that Euphrates River is. So what else do we know about this war? The other thing we know about this Euphrates River War is that that territory is 100%, at least 99.99% Islamic. It's Muslim territory. That Euphrates River, every square inch of that territory that Euphrates River flows down is Islamic. It's an Islamic river, no doubt about it. And so what does this point to? Well, the 4th horse of the apocalypse, the green horse, the Muslim religion, the powerhouse religion, the green horse powerhouse religion. And so this is telling us that this green horse will be very, very much involved in this Third World War. And they've been involved this whole time since 1990. So what's all this telling us, man? If the Euphrates River is going to emanate from there, it's obvious that Islam, with its 1.6 billion people, is going to be involved in this war, this green horse. Okay? So this is a prophecy, a prediction of war that's going to kill 1/3 of mankind. And this green horse, this religious powerhouse known as Islam, is going to be highly involved. So now, what do we know for sure? What's written in Scripture? And do we know for sure about what's happening right now? Because let's face it, this is the 6th trumpet. There's only 7. So if the 5th trumpet is blown and we're waiting on the 6th trumpet to blow, which is the 6th trumpet war, World War III, we got to be getting extremely close, right? So if we're that close, now we need to try to relate these events of the 6th trumpet to what's happening right now in this current times that we're living in right now as we speak. So what can we do to connect what is prophesied of the 6th trumpet and what's happening right now in our time? So we know that China has a population of 200 million soldiers. China has bragged for a long time that it could field a 200 million man army. Islam, which has a population of all the Islamic countries and religion around the world there, mostly in the southern hemisphere, Africa and southern Asia there, around Indonesia and all that, has like 1.6 million members, okay? That's huge. That's about the size of the population of China. So Islam, with this large population of members in their religion, could also field a 200 million man army. Either one of those could do it. So they have enough population, either one of them could field a 200 million army. So will the army of 200 million soldiers be Islam or China? Well, it mentions having breastplates of fiery red, hyacinth blue, and sulfur yellow. So these colors are communist colors. So I guess if I had to flip a coin between these two large populated deities that could actually man a 200 million army, because of the fiery red, the hyacinth blue, and the sulfur yellow and colors pointing to communism, I'd almost have to say China. This is speaking of China. But it could be that because it's going to kill 1/3 of mankind, it could be a coalition of China, Iran, Korea, Russia, together as a coalition that's going to do it. But I think here the scriptures, it's clear to me that's going to be a one nation army that's going to be able to supply that 200 million man army. And since the colors of this army was fiery red and sulfur yellow and Iceland blue, I've got to say this is talking about China. Okay. But if you're going to kill 1/3 of mankind, they've already proven that you can't do it with conventional warfare. You can't do it. Okay. So since they've proven that you could fight a war for 100 years with conventional weapons, and you couldn't kill that many people. And so the only way to kill that many people is with nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare. That's it. It's the only way to kill that many people. It's the only way it's going to happen. So anyway, that's the sixth trumpet prophecy. It's a big prophecy because it's predicting a big war is coming. The largest and worst war, most deadly war that mankind will ever engage in. And it's coming. And it could happen at any moment, really. We're just waiting for that sixth trumpet to blow. So we're in a kind of like a stall right now. You know, we're between the fifth trumpet and the sixth trumpet, just kind of hanging loose, waiting on that sixth one to blow. That's where we're at. And that can happen at any moment, really. It could happen right now. They don't really tell us if this war is going to happen before the final 3.5 years begins or not. But my guess is it's going to happen just before the Great Tribulation period. And I don't mean the final 7 years like Christianity teaches. I'm saying before the final 3.5 years of tribulation. Tribulation's only 3.5 years long. Okay, we know that from Daniel 12. So yeah, I think just from what Scripture, how Scripture is speaking here, that this war, World War III, is going to happen just before the Great Tribulation years begin. That's my guess. Matter of fact, that Third World War was probably what's going to usher in the anti-Messiah, because it's going to be such devastation and carnage, death, destruction, chaos like the world's never seen. Just to get an idea, you know, how much 1/3 of mankind is dying, 2.4 billion. Your mind can't even conceive that number, first of all. Second of all, that's more carnage. And those are the ones that are going to die. Can you imagine how many will be wounded? I mean, people just don't die in war. They get wounded as well. So if that many people are going to die, there's going to be a whole lot of people wounded and lamed and hurt. It always is in war. Not everybody dies. Some are lame. Some are, you know, some come back wounded. Some, you know, all kinds of things. So there's going to be a lot of that going on. If 1/3 die, there's going to be probably 1/3 wounded and lamed out of this war. It's going to be crazy, man. But anyway, 1/3, 2.4 billion, that's more death in that war than all the other wars mankind has ever fought in the history of the world put together. Way more. Way more. I mean, look at World War II, 52 million. World War I, 8 million, right? What's that? That's 60 million. We're talking 2.4 billion. So you can see it's way more death than all the other wars in the history of the planet fought ever, all of them put together. There's never been that much death that's going to happen in this one single war. It's crazy. You can't even count that high. It would take probably 3 or 4 generations to start counting to be able to count to 2.4 billion. You can't even get there in your lifetime. You can't count that high. That's a lot of people. Yeah, to kill that many people, there's no doubt nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare is going to happen. Weapons of mass destruction will be thrown around like candy to children. It's going to be horrific. All right. So more than likely, this happens before the final 3.5 years. I would say just before, probably is what's going to usher the anti-Messiah and the false prophet onto the world stage. And that's just a guess, but that's what I think. If it happens in, if it happens after the Great Tribulation begins, that last 3.5 years is going to be mind-blowing. Because there's going to be 2 nuclear wars, the World War III and Armageddon. Armageddon's going to go nuclear as well. But Armageddon's going to be more of a local war in the Middle East, whereas World War III will be worldwide. It'll be a worldwide war. It'll be a much broader war. And Armageddon's going to be more centralized or localized over in the Valley of Megiddo in Jerusalem. And that's where that nuclear detonation is going to happen at the end of Armageddon, at the coming of the second coming of Yahusha. And he's going to block that nuclear blast from destroying Jerusalem. Okay, it is return. All right. So now we went through the first 6. We have World War I at the first trumpet, and I don't think that's a coincidence. 1914, we have the second trumpet at the Second World War happening at the second trumpet, 1939. I don't think that's a coincidence either. That's the second trumpet in the Second War, the first trumpet in the First War. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's the power of Yahuwah speaking there. 1914, 1939, the third trumpet, Chernobyl, Wormwood, nuclear disaster, the greatest nuclear disaster the world has ever known, happened in 1986. The blast, the smoke from the blast of that explosion went 1 mile into the air. Wormwood means Chernobyl in Russia. There's more radiation released in that nuclear disaster than the nuclear radiation that was released at the dropping of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The fourth messenger, and that happened in 1986. The fourth messenger, possibly Yahuwah speeding up time and shortening the days by 45 days, according to what's written in Daniel 12. And this would have happened sometime, probably in 1986, at the birth of the New World Order, when the Berlin Wall fell, which I think is also described, maybe very well described, as the beast, that had his head wounded, could be Berlin, is that the division of Berlin and being healed when that wall came down. That could be related as well. But anyway, the speeding up of time, the creation of the New World Order, 1986, and then the fifth trumpet being Saddam Hussein, the Persian Gulf Wars, the lighting of 700 oil wells on fire, blotting out the sun in the air from the smoke of the pit, in the wars over there with the helicopters and the jets and everything. So this would be the War on Terror. It actually lasted for 20 years. It's an extremely long war, the longest war the United States has ever fought. 20-year war, longest war we've ever been in. Why wouldn't that be in Scripture? You know, and so then the sixth trumpet has not sounded yet, but it's the sixth trumpet war will usher and bring in World War III. And it will be the most gruesome, horrific, greatest war mankind has ever fought or ever will fight in. And it precedes Armageddon. Okay, so there's the first six trumpets. And so where are we at in that timeline? We're between the fifth trumpet and the sixth trumpet. We're right there, and we're just in a stalemate. We're kind of stalled there, just waiting on that sixth trumpet war to start, the sixth trumpet to blow. So we're real close. We're very close to the second coming of Yahusha. So that brings up the seventh trumpet in Revelations 11, verse 15 through 18. And that says, and the seventh messenger sounded, and there came to be loud voices in the heaven saying, the reign of this world has become the reign of our master and of his Mashiach, and he shall reign forever and ever. Okay, so the reign of this world has ended. So the 6,000 years dedicated to mankind has expired. So this would be the second coming of Yahusha and his Mashiach, and he shall reign forever and ever. So he'll reign for 1,000 years, the millennium reign, and then he'll reign forever and ever because there will be no end to his reign. It'll go into eternity. Okay, and these 24 elders sitting before Yahuwah on their thrones fell on their faces and worshiped Yahuwah, saying, we give you thanks, O Yahuwah Al Shaddai, the one who is, who was, and who is coming. Get it? Who is coming at his second coming? Because you have taken your great power and reigned, and the nations were enraged, and your wrath has come in the time of the dead to be judged. That's the white throne judgment. And to give the reward to your servants, the prophets, and to the Kadeshim, and to those who fear your name, small and great, and to destroy those who destroy the Eretz. In the Mishkan of Yahuwah, and it goes on. Okay, so what's happening under the seventh trumpet then? Well, the kingdom of this world has ended. Man's reign's over. So the Armageddon's done. Everything's over. When that trumpet blasts, the kingdoms of this world is done, abolished, and the kingdoms of this world are now the kingdom of Yahusha and the Mashiach, who will reign forever and ever. Okay, his wrath comes at his second coming in the day of Yahuwah, and then he rewards his chosen at the second coming of Yahusha, he rewards his people with immortality. The first resurrection happens as well. So Paul teaches us about this last trump. And he mentions a last trump in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 51 through 53. And if you want to go there, we'll get a peek at it. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 51 through 53. It's a long chapter, isn't it? So 51 through 53 says, "See, I speak a secret to you. We shall not all sleep, but we shall be all changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump." Could that be the seventh trump? His second coming? Absolutely. "For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible." See, so the seventh trumpet signifies that man's reign is over. The 6,000 years is over. That brings in the second coming. At the second coming of Yahusha is the first resurrection happens. Okay? And the day of Yahuwah. Same thing. And so in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound and the dead shall be raised. That's first resurrection. Incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible has to put on incorruption, and this mortal to put in on immortality. So is Paul speaking of the seventh trumpet here in 1 Corinthians? Yeah, I think he is. So what's going to happen is the people who are dead in Mashiach will be raised from the dead at the sound of the seventh trumpet. That means the 6,000 years is over, and here comes Yahusha. Okay, his second coming. And all of us that are still alive on the earth in Mashiach will be changed from mortal to immortal in the twinkling of an eye. So the dead will be raised, giving them a mortal body. Those who remain at his second coming will receive their immortal bodies. And that will be his chosen, his election, his bride. That's the 144,000 folks. And that's who will be reigning with him for 1,000 years from Jerusalem with him in our immortal bodies. The dead in Mashiach and those who remain alive will be changed in the blink of an eye, and will be caught up with him together, fly away, be caught up with him together in the clouds as he returns to the earth, to the Mount of Olives. And we'll come right back down. We'll fly away and meet him in the clouds as he's descending, but then we're going to descend with him down to the Mount of Olives. Okay? And we'll reign as kings and priests with the King of Kings and the Priest of Priests as he comes back down to the earth to reign for 1,000 years. And we will forever be with him because we'll be his bride. Where he goes, we go. We're his bride, man. So just take a look now at 1 Thessalonians. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 says, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16 says, well, this is another account of the last trump, okay? And Paul wrote this as well. "Because the Master himself shall come down from the heaven with a shout, with the voice of a chief messenger, and with the trumpet of Yahuwah. And with the trumpet of Yahuwah. And the dead in Mashiach shall rise first. Then we, the living who are left over, shall be caught away together with them in the clouds, with the dead, who was the first resurrection, together with them in the clouds to meet the master in the air. So we shall always be with the master. So then encourage one another with these words. So is that the seventh trumpet? I say it is. I say it is. So that seventh trumpet then is, when it blows, it's all she wrote. That's the end of man's rule. The reign of Yahuwah begins. The millennium reign begins. The resurrection, the second coming of Yahusha happens. The first resurrection happens. The day of Yahuwah happens. And then we go into the millennium reign. That's the seventh trumpet, man. So is Paul talking about the seventh trumpet here in 1 Thessalonians and 1 Corinthians? Yeah, I say he is. So the most vital or critical thing that we're talking about here in this evening's study, folks, this evening is the second coming of Yahusha and the second resurrection. Romans 8:11 tells us what to do if we want to be part of this first resurrection. Let's go to that. Romans 8. Romans 8:11. And if the Ruach of him who raised Yahusha from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Mashiach from the dead shall also give life to your mortal bodies through his Ruach dwelling in you. Through his Ruach dwelling in you. So you want to make sure that you receive this amazing, wonderful, awesome gift of the immersion of the Ruach HaKodesh. Well, you can still do it. Because according to Romans 8:11 here, it's the Ruach HaKodesh dwelling in you. That's the power that will raise you up in the last day, at the last trump. So the critical thing that we need to understand here, folks, is you got to be immersed with the Ruach HaKodesh if you want to be part of that first resurrection. And if you're alive at his second coming, you still have to have the Ruach HaKodesh in you to be changed in the blink of an eye and given an immortal body. Go from mortal to immortal, from mortal to immortal. You have to have that immersion of the Ruach HaKodesh. So that's the most important, critical, vital thing to understand here at the end of this study. That's the most important thing we've said all night, matter of fact. Be immersed in the Ruach. You have to be. Read Romans 8:11 over and over and over again 100 times until you understand that, until you come to a good understanding of that. It's very important. So there it is. That's the end of the study. And so what can we say from studying these trumpets this evening is we can get a really good understanding, a very good bird's eye view of where we're at on the timeline of the revelation, which, don't forget, that's the revealing of the second coming of Yahusha. That's what that is. Yeah, it reveals to us who he is, but more importantly, it's the revealing of the second coming of Yahusha. And so these are all the events that's going to happen in mankind's world leading up to his second coming. That's what these are. These aren't supposed to be a big secret. This ain't supposed to be something we can't understand. He wants us to know when he's coming back. And so, as we found out last week in our study of the 7 seals, and more specifically the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which is the first 4 seals, same as that week, the last week, we can see this week by studying the trumpets where we're at in time. And so we have progressed beyond 1914, 1939, 1986, 1990, and 91. And so we've progressed we've gone beyond all of that, 1986, 1990, 91. And now we are waiting. The War of Terror, ended, which I believe is described in the 5th trumpet. And so ended in 2000, started 2001 and ended in 2021. So there's your 2 Gulf Wars, if you will, in 1990, 91, and then again in 2001 with the destruction of the Twin Towers to 2021. So I got that mixed up a little bit earlier, but I got it straight now. All right. And so now that War on Terror stuff was a 20-year war, the longest war the United States has ever been engaged in, ended in 2021. And now it's 2025, folks. And we're still sitting here waiting on that 6th trumpet to sound. That's where we're at. That puts us right dead on track, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. So the War on Terror ended, or the 5th trumpet ended, we could say, in 2021. And now we're waiting on the 6th trumpet to blow. And the year's 2025. That's where we're at. So are we close to the second coming of Yahusha? Yeah, you better believe it. We're very close. We're very close. We have all the world powers, the spirits that are gonna, the 4 spirits. Remember, we found out that the horses were actually spirits. Remember that last week? And so we have 4 spirits that are going to be prevalent on the earth at the second coming of Yahusha. They're all here. They're all here with us right now. And we can see that we've went for the trumpets beginning 1914 and the 5th trumpet ending in 2021. And we're in 2025 and we're still waiting on that 6th trumpet to blow, which is going to be the 6th trumpet war, World War III. And you know, when that happens, we were getting really close to the return of Yahusha then. We're definitely within a 7-year period once that 6th trumpet blows. We have to be. Probably even closer. I don't think that's going to be a real long war. Once them nukes start flying, yeah, it's going to end pretty quickly, you know. It's going to be nasty, but it's not going to be real long. How can it be? So anyway, that's where we're at in time. So we're getting really close to the second coming of Yahusha, that 7th trumpet blowing right after World War III kicks in and the tribulation years are over. Here comes Yahusha. When the tribulation years start, it's only going to be a 3.5-year period. You know, it's going to be fast and furious and horrendous, you know, but it'll climax with Armageddon, the second coming of Yahusha, and the day of Yahuwah, the nuclear blast. A lot of people think that Armageddon's going to be the biggest, baddest war that that the world's ever fought, but it's not. That's World War III. Armageddon's going to be more localized in the Middle East. Matter of fact, it's going to be in the Valley of Megiddo and on up into Jerusalem. Right at the time of the second coming of Yahusha. Once that army, the Antichrist army, the anti-Messiah army gets to Jerusalem at the end of the Battle of Armageddon, they're going to meet Yahusha at his second coming. He'll be coming right down to the Mount of Olives right after they get there and ravish half of the city. He'll be ravished. And here he comes. Okay, so getting close to the second coming. That's all I know. So that's the end of the study this evening, folks. Thank you for studying with me. I really appreciate you. Thanks for chatting up a storm there in the chat room and being nice to each other and showing each other love and kindness and gratitude and respect. And thanks for being here and studying with me this evening. I appreciate your attendance more than you'll ever know. And don't forget about tomorrow. We have the Nazarene Assembly Scripture Study Group, where we bring people into the live stream, and we all get together and study Scripture together. And we're in the book of Yirmiyahu or Jeremiah. That's what we're studying, and it's so far been a great study. And we've been learning quite a bit about the prophets and the different the prophecies given to Jeremiah, and a lot of fun. And it's good to be with your Mishpaka and the other Nazarene, and it helps you stay obedient to the Torah and to observe the Yom Shabbat and see it as a delight, something to look forward to, spending time with like-minded people. And so, if you've never been there, come on and join us. And if you want to, come on into the live broadcast with us. We always like to fill that up if we can. We have 10 slots. People can come in and read Scripture and talk about Scripture and interpret Scripture and study together. And then we like to have a full chat room. And of course, you're more than welcome to be there incognito and listen and watch. And you don't really have to participate at all if you don't want to. And we still appreciate your attendance. And so, come join us and have fun with us as we study Scripture together as one in Mashiach. And we do that right here on this same channel. So it's on Sparking You is Yah, 3 words, and it starts at 12 o'clock noontime. That would be Eastern Standard Time. So 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 11 o'clock a.m. Texas time, 10 o'clock a.m. Arizona time. All esteem to Yahuwah. So anyway, be there or be square. And remember to stay in love with Yahusha. So long, Nazarene, beloved of Yahuwah. So long, everyone. Peace, joy, and love to everyone. See you next week or see you tomorrow. Your choice. So long.